Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Fulfill Radio Bible broadcast, Two Guys in the Bible. This is William Bell, and with me is Dr. Don Preston. We are delighted to be with you today, as we are every Tuesday evening, and looking forward to another great study. Hope that you've had a wonderful day. It was great to have some sunshine here in Memphis today, and a little bit of warm weather. I was able to walk outside in a T-shirt and didn't need a coat. Of course, I didn't stay out there in that weather, but nevertheless, it was pretty nice, and that's good. So I don't know what's happening over in Oklahoma, but if they have any bad weather, I hope that it doesn't cross the Mississippi River.
Well, it normally moves in your direction, and for the last two mornings, when the last 2 mornings when I've walked out, you couldn't hardly see the street from my garage door. The fog has been so thick. I mean, it has just been socked in like crazy. Now, it hasn't been cold, thankfully enough, but it's just crazy fog. And today it's been rainy, dull, dreary. Today's been one of those type of days that makes you just want to curl up on the couch with a warm blanket and go to sleep. Or one of my very favorite things to do, I must tell you, when it's raining, I love to get a cup of coffee. I love to walk out onto the carport. Of course, it's a metal carport. And just stand there drinking a cup of hot coffee while the rain comes down on that metal roof of the carport. I don't know. There's just something about that I absolutely love.
Well, good for you. I used to go to what we call the country, to my grandfather's house every summer when I was a kid. And, of course, they had one of those old houses with the tin roof, and there was nothing like the rain coming down on that tin roof, whether it be at night or even during the day. But it was an experience to have, during the time. And so I know all about water on a tin roof.
Yeah. I remember we used to have a house like that when I was just a kid myself. We lived in a house at Greenland, Arkansas, which is immediately south of Fayetteville. It's almost a suburb of Fayetteville anymore, but it had a tin roof. It was an old 2-story house, and you would hear that rain, or just occasionally, we'd get hail. That was not such a pleasant sound, I can tell you right now. You would think that the sky was coming through that roof.
Yeah.
But anyway, childhood memories, as they say. So anyway, I know you're busy. I've been busy. In fact, I have been sitting over there. I was trying to do some reading, to be honest about it, just more research on a book that I'm working on. And I have been so sleepy this afternoon, I have just barely been able to sit up. I've just been without any energy whatsoever, and so if my microphone goes dead, and you hear this horrible thunder, sort of like that phone.
Yes, and I meant to throw it out of the room, and it's sitting right under the mic today, so I forgot it. But anyway, you go ahead while I get rid of this phone.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, I was just saying that if my mic kind of goes dead from me talking, but you hear this sound, it's probably me having fallen asleep and snoring. I just, boy, it's just been one of those days where I just could not hardly stay awake. I've been threatening to buy some of the supplements that I've been hearing an awful lot about, called Balance of Nature. People talk about more energy and blah 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 blah. Of course, that's probably just advertising, but I get so tired of being tired. I get tired of 1 o'clock. No matter how I try, the nap just all but overwhelms me. It's just it's going to come, and the only way that I could really honestly overcome it is just get up, go get in the truck, and drive, which is may not be the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
But
well, I used to suffer from that a lot, but I started going to the gym, and I'm doing it pretty regularly now. And so, I walk, lift a little bit of weights, just enough to keep me toned up. I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder or anything. So, but I noticed that, my energy level has been up, and I haven't been as fatigued as sometimes I am. And so it's been pretty good. As a matter of fact, I was wondering, I said, why am I not sleeping? When normally I am, just as you were saying, but that has helped out quite a bit. And like I said before, when I went to Ghana, with all the walking I had to do in the heat, if I hadn't been preparing, and I wasn't preparing for that necessarily, I was just doing it. But if I had not done that, there's no way I could have kept up with them at all, and I had 3 days of just trying to get adjusted, but once I got adjusted, it was fine. But I tell you, the heat saps all your energy, and then the long, dusty roads, it was tough for a minute, but once you get adjusted, you're okay. So, it was that exercise and conditioning that helped quite a bit.
Well, in my own personal case, that's true. Some years ago, I was going to the gym 3 days a week, and I actually got quite buff. And I would tell a story about that, but my wife's in the next room, and I'm afraid if I told that story, she'd come out and hurt me because she didn't. She never even noticed that I had been going to the gym and was in good shape, but I actually tore a muscle in my arm, and that prevented me from doing the rest of the stuff that I was enjoying the most. And so I discontinued that, and that's probably one of the reasons why I do get so sleepy. I get so tired, but I can go to a swap meet, William. And my wife says that proves it's all psychological. I can go to a swap meet. I can get there at 6 o'clock. I can walk to 4 o'clock that afternoon, and just never get sleepy. Never get fatigued. Now I come home and I die that night, but nonetheless, boy, I'm just hooking it. I'm walking. I don't slow down for anything. And I will tell you this. If it's a 3-day swap meet, after the first day, I'm dead dog. I'm just white. By the third day, by the end of the third day, I don't even hardly feel it. So my body does it. Even though I'm not a young man anymore, my body still adjusts pretty quickly to that kind of activity. And I guess there's something to be said about that. So if I had a swap meet to go to every weekend, I'd be in great shape.
Well, look, just imagine that you were there and then go on with your life. Yeah, I guess that's one way to do it. Well, William, I have to say that the emails have been just a tad slower this week. Haven't heard from quite so many people. I have had 2 or 3 fantastic emails, however. One individual wrote to me, and they had read my Death of Adam, Life of Christ. And this individual is one who has been very, very active in supporting covenant eschatology and everything. But, life has happened a great deal. But he contacted me, and he told me, he said,
I just have to let you know that I was reading your book, The Death of Adam, the Life of Christ. And he said, I got to chapter 13, in which you pointed out that the focus of Christ's redemptive work was to overcome spiritual death. And by overcoming spiritual death, then physical death took its, quote, natural place in our lives, not as our enemy, but as the transition from this world to the next. And he said, I have to tell you that I may have known that, but he said it never hit home like it did. He said, I read it, I reread it, and I read it the third time. And he said, I cannot begin to express to you what an incredible joy it was to read that and to finally fully grasp the significance of the finished work of Christ and how Christ's spiritual work has put all things physical within the proper perspective. And so that was really an encouraging email that I received. It was just a really, really wonderful note. Got a fantastic email from a gentleman from New Zealand who said that he has been wandering the landscape of eschatology, trying to find some answers. And he said, I literally stumbled on to your YouTube videos, and he said, all of a sudden I'm hooked. All of a sudden I'm finding answers. And he said, I just simply cannot tell you how thrilled and how excited I am about what I'm discovering. So even though it's been a little bit slower this week than normal, there's been some really, really wonderful correspondence sent to me about people and how the message is changing their lives.
Yeah, well, that's very good. I was talking to this young man today, actually from Ghana. He's about 20 years old, and he said he started studying eschatology 3 months ago. He's attending university there, and he asked if I could even come there when he prepares to graduate. And so I asked him, about the churches in his area, and he said, well, no. He says, there's no one here. And he says, if I were to go public, he says, they're going to kick me out. I said, well, yeah, I understand how all that works. I know how that works. Sure. I said, but I tell you what, if you are interested, we can definitely work together. And so he's another, opportunity. And because I told him if I, did some work there, I'd be looking for someone, that's young who would be willing to, do some work. And he expressed that he would, and that we would just look at ways that we could find to support, because, to support him. And I told him, I said, that's going to be your biggest thing, is to make sure that you have a way to support yourself so that you're not, put in jeopardy by people who would, want to fire you just because, you disagree. And I know that's what you have had to do. That's what I've had to do to, to keep doing what we do. And that's been a blessing. I mean, it's really been a tremendous blessing to be able to do it.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. Listen, folks, if you are not aware of the incredible work that William Bell is doing, the groundwork that he is laying for the spreading of truth in Ghana, you really need to contact him. You need to go to his website, allthingsfulfilled.com. I'm certainly not going to share anything that he shared with me in private, but to simply say that William is doing some groundbreaking, history-making things in Ghana that are going to have impact for generations to come is an understatement. And I told William on the phone yesterday when he and I were talking about this, I could not be more proud of and for anyone than I am of the work that William Bell is doing and will be continuing to do in Ghana. So just keep that in your prayers, keep that in your thoughts. If you're looking for something to support, consider that, because it is an absolutely worthy and worthwhile endeavor that William is involved in.
Well, thank you for that, Don. I appreciate it very much.
That was not a paid political announcement, by the way, folks.
I'd be
William
willing
did
to
not
give
ask
him a
me to
dime
say.
for it.
There you go. Yes. Well, to tell you, folks, how much I believe in this, my wife and I sent a check of support to William today. I'm not going to tell you how much. It's not important. The point of fact is that we just really, really believe in what William is doing. We're excited about it. We just think the potential for it is incredible. And it's certainly not like my wife and I have an awful lot of money to give, but this is something that we truly believe in. So we're just more than happy to be able to offer what we can as a contribution toward that work. So, all right. Well, folks, we continue our discussion of the Messianic temple. We've been spending a good little bit of time in Isaiah chapter 65. And that's because Isaiah 65 contains all of the elements that are linked with the Messianic temple. Now, I do want to say this. When we talk to our dispensational friends, you really have to understand the confusion that is in the Messianic movement, and specifically the dispensational movement. And here's what I mean. On the one hand, they tell us that the Messianic, the millennial temple, will be established at the second coming of Christ. Now, before the second coming of Christ, there's a tribulation temple. The man of sin signs a peace treaty with Israel and allows them to build the temple in Jerusalem, and how they could build what they have envisioned for Jerusalem in 3.5 years. I mean, after all, it took 46 years plus to build the Herodian temple. So to suggest that this tribulation temple is going to be built in 3.5 years is really kind of ludicrous. But all that aside, in dispensationalism, you have the tribulation temple. Well, in the middle of the 7-year period of time from the rapture until the second coming, you have 3.5 years for the construction of the temple, for the reestablishment of the Zadokite priesthood, the offering of the physical sacrifices, the reinstitution of physical circumcision, etc., etc. But then the man of sin breaks the treaty with Israel. He violates the treaty, and he begins persecuting the Jews and destroys the temple. Now, see, technically, that's the third temple. That tribulation temple is the third temple. So now it's destroyed within the 70th week of Daniel. Well, then, at the height of the Great Tribulation, the Jews cry out to Jesus for deliverance from the man of sin and from the Great Tribulation. Jesus appears on the clouds of heaven, the second appearing, destroys the man of sin, and now some posit the destruction of the tribulation temple at the second coming. That's the less common view, the best that I can determine. Somebody can set me right on that if you wish. But point of it is, Jesus destroys the man of sin at his second coming. Then, at his second coming, is the establishment of the Messianic temple. Christ rules on earth, after the establishment of the Messianic temple. Christ rules on earth in the kingdom. At the end of the 1,000-year reign, there is a rebellion, Gog and Magog of Revelation 20, verse 8 and following. And God destroys them by sending fire from heaven. And at that destruction, at the end of the millennium, pardon me, what do you have? The new heaven and the new earth. Well, you see that narrative, that timeline, is presented with some really, really severe problems in Isaiah 65, because Isaiah 65 doesn't depict the establishment of the Messianic temple, which is Isaiah 65:25. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all of my holy mountain. That's the Messianic temple. But that situation doesn't come until the new, pardon me, until the new heaven and the new earth. Well, if that situation, if the Messianic temple doesn't come until Isaiah 65:25, in other words, doesn't come until the new heaven and new earth, and in the New Jerusalem, see, the New Jerusalem doesn't come until the new heaven and new earth. Well, wait a minute. The Messianic temple is supposed to be in the new heaven and the new earth. Oh, wait a minute. Let me back up. It's supposed to be in the New Jerusalem. But the New Jerusalem only appears in the new heaven and new earth, which only comes biblically at the end of the millennium, not at the beginning of it. Millennialists do not believe that the new heaven and new earth comes at the second coming of Christ. They believe it comes at the end of the millennium. And so in the dispensational narrative, Isaiah 65 completely disrupts it. If there's anything chronological at all in Isaiah 65, and there most assuredly is, so if there's a chronological narrative, if there's a chronological flow in Isaiah 65, then the entire dispensational chronological timeline is totally destroyed. Because once again, to reiterate and reemphasize, they have the establishment of the Messianic temple in the millennium. But Isaiah 65 puts the New Jerusalem at the end of the millennium, not at the beginning of it, at the end of it. And Isaiah 65 has the New Jerusalem in the new heaven and the new earth. But again, the dispensationalists do not have the New Jerusalem at the beginning of the millennium, Jerusalem in the new heaven, new earth at the end of the millennium. But all of that means that the Messianic temple is not established until the end of the millennium. So, here's what that means. Our dispensational friends tell us, okay, the rapture hasn't happened yet. Well, if the rapture hasn't happened yet, then we haven't had the tribulation temple constructed. Well, if we haven't had the tribulation temple constructed, we certainly haven't had the coming of the Lord to judge the man of sin. If we haven't had the second coming, then we most assuredly cannot say that the building of the Messianic temple is at hand. I mean, you can't have the Messianic temple established until at least 7 years after the rapture. You cannot have the Messianic temple constructed until after the construction of the tribulation temple, the reinstitution of what Thomas Ice calls, quote, traditional Judaism restored, unquote, along with animal sacrifices, the Jewish priesthood, all of that established in or immediately after the rapture in Jerusalem by the man of sin, who then destroys that temple. And so when you hear people talking today, oh my goodness, they're getting ready to rebuild the temple. Well, do they mean the tribulation temple of the man of sin? And why would anybody get excited about that? I mean, think about that, folks. Why would anybody be excited about the construction of a temple at the permission of, at the prompting of the man of sin, knowing that that man of sin is God's great or greatest enemy? Why would anybody be excited about that? And why would anybody be excited about the fact that the appearance of the man of sin, according to the dispensational paradigm, means that the Great Tribulation, the greatest, most horrific thing that the world has ever seen, is about to take place with 2/3 of the Jews and 3/5 of the earth population completely wiped out? That's something to get excited about. I mean, I fail to see where any of that is really honestly something to anticipate. It really makes no sense at all to me. Now, I suppose that a dispensationalist could say, well, you don't get the good news until the bad news. Well, that's true. That is absolutely true in a biblical in a biblical formulation. We know that that's true. The good news came out of the bad news. The bad news was always God's going to judge Israel, God's going to judge the wicked, but the good news is he's going to save the righteous. And yet, in the dispensational paradigm, I would almost say that the bad news outweighs the good. It's just really unfathomable how anybody could get excited about the building of a tribulation temple. All the while, folks, all they're really talking about is the Messianic temple. There is apparently so much confusion, even within the dispensational camp, about the number of temples that the so-called experts within that movement actually posit. And so it would behoove dispensational students, really honestly, to take a closer look at their own doctrine and to see what is being taught. You know, they talk about, for instance, well, we got to have a red heifer. How many times have we seen reports on the news, you know, the so-called prophecy pundits? How many times did Jack Van Impe, who passed away a couple of weeks ago or last week maybe, how many times did he come on and get almost breathless announcing they have discovered a red heifer has been born? That they've got to have a red heifer to offer as a sacrifice to purify the temple. Without the ashes of a red heifer, they cannot have the Messianic temple. Without the ashes of a red heifer, they cannot consecrate the priesthood. Without the ashes of the red heifer, they cannot even offer acceptable sacrifices in the temple. Oh my goodness, they found a red heifer. And of course, every single time they claim that they found a properly qualified red heifer, it turns up and it sprouts up black hairs or white hairs or, you know, gray hairs or something like that. So that story disappears. And so they start looking for another one. And I've been saying for years, every time you hear one of the dispensational writers on TV or radio or read their writings, when they get all breathless and all excited about how close we are to the building of the temple. William, do you remember, was it 1982 or 1992, that Randall Price and Thomas Ice, they co-wrote a book entitled Ready to Build?
I don't know what the year was. I do have the book on my shelf, though. And I could probably pull it very shortly, so just keep talking and I'll get it for you.
Well, I know that it was somewhere between 82 and 92. It's somewhere along in there. And, of course, they wrote, there are preparations being made right now for the building of the temple. Well, let's say it was 82. That's 36 years ago. That's a generation ago, virtually. If it was 1992, it's still almost a generation. And folks, I can tell you right now, with all the hoopla that that is very often made about how close we are and about the preparations being made. You know, they have what they call the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. And I very occasionally have people contact me, email me, don't you know that they're getting ready to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem any day? And of course, I very commonly respond, well, with all due respect, I didn't realize that the Muslims had given them permission to tear down the Dome of the Rock. And most people are not, aware. And yes, folks, for those who might want to contact me about this, I am acutely aware, I'm more than aware, of the fact that according to some scholars, the Dome of the Rock is not actually sitting on the original Temple Mount. That the original Temple Mount was actually slightly removed from where the Dome of the Rock is sitting. And so as some archaeologists, or I should say some theologians, based upon that archaeological evidence, they like to say, well, you see, since the Dome of the Rock is not technically, accurately in the place that has historically been assigned as the true location of the temple, since that true location is offset from the Dome of the Rock, hey, the Jews can start building any time now. Well, in the first place, there's not a consensus that the true location of the temple is not there at that location. And one has to wonder if they knew for a fact where that the true legitimate location of the original Temple Mount was, and that it was not on the Temple Mount as it is assigned. Don't you think they would legitimately be in the process of building? And by the way, let's not forget the Western Wall that is there. That gives you a really, really, really good starting point for determining where the original Temple Mount was. I mean, that's the West Wall of the temple, I should say, of the outer wall of the temple. So, you could measure about a quarter of a mile east from that, and you would know where the Temple Mount was. That, to me, doesn't seem like it's all that incredibly difficult. But I'll let people who are better at that type of calculation discuss that type of thing.
Let me say this.
Okay,
you got
go
an
ahead.
incredible memory because it's 1992.
Okay, I knew it was somewhere back in there. And I know that, that book, which they produced back there in 92, that book, along with Edgar Whisenant's 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1988, and then it was, recalculate 89 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1989, there's a reason why those books appear, they make a splash, they create fear, and then all of a sudden they disappear. And they wind up on the shelves of the discount bookstores being sold literally for pennies on the dollar. Because, after all, the prophecies failed. Their predictions were proven false. So, other than people like me or William, who will occasionally buy some of those books just to be able to document the false prophecies in them and to be able to tell people, you are aware that Hal Lindsey made the following prediction that failed. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Yes, he did on page such and such. He most assuredly did. I have the book in my files, in my library. And, oh, by the way, I have in my library 2 copies of the book Millions Now Living Will Never Die, in which the Millennial Dawn people who became the Jehovah's Witnesses, J. Stuart Russell, not J. Stuart Russell, but Russell, predicted that the Lord was going to come and establish his kingdom. And, oh, by the way, they bought a house. You got to catch this, folks. They actually bought a house in Los Angeles for Abraham to live in. Yeah, I've got 2 copies of that original book.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. But that book, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, even back when I was in preacher school, the local library informed some of the students, because one of our professors told us about the book. He had a copy of it as well. And he said, look, guys, you can't hardly find a copy of that anywhere. So some of our students went to the local library, and they asked the librarian for a copy of it. And the librarian said that some of the local Jehovah's Witnesses had come and taken the book. They had checked it out and never returned it. So they were in the process, literally, of destroying the evidence of their failed prediction. And so on and on it goes, folks. This has been going on for far too long. It's one of the reasons why what William and I do right here on Two Guys in the Bible on Fulfilled Radio, it's why we are a voice you can trust. We're not going to be predicting the coming of the Lord is going to happen in 2015. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait, that didn't work out real well, did it? Yeah, I had a guy send me an email, a really lengthy email. He had been watching my, YouTubes and what have you, he'd read some of my articles on my website, and he wrote me this rather long email assuring me that the rapture, the end of the world, was going to happen in September 2015, that if there's a God in heaven, if the Bible is inspired, this cannot fail. I wrote back, and I said, well, sir, I appreciate your zeal. I appreciate your dedication. I appreciate your love for the Lord. However, you're flat dead wrong. And I said, I'm going to make the following prediction. Your prediction will fail. And I said, what I'm going to ask you to do is in October of 2015, after your prediction has failed, would you please contact me and let us engage in some honorable, respectful dialogue? And I wrote a few comments from the scriptures, some of the passages. Well, he never answered. So in October of 2015, I happened to be shuffling pages on my desk. Notice I did not say cleaning up my desk. I just simply said shuffling some pages. Shuffling some pages on my desk, and I came on that email exchange. So I sent him an email. And I said, I'm not writing this to say I told you so. I'm writing this out of respect for someone who obviously loves the Lord and wants to know him. But I said, if you'll remember our email exchange, I told you your prediction would be wrong, and I asked you to contact me. So I said, I'm asking you now to please engage in dialogue with me. Well, I have to give him credit. He wrote back, and he said, I was indeed wrong. I am absolutely shattered that my predictions did not come true. I have to go back, and I have to recalculate and rethink and restudy. Well, I wrote back, and I said, what you really honestly need to do is to accept the Lord's word that he said the end was near in his generation. And again, I typed out a fairly lengthy, little discourse for him and to him. I've never heard another word. And, now next year, okay, I have an exchange in my files from this individual. It's a woman who kept attacking me on YouTube. And this woman told me without any fail whatsoever, the Lord is going to come, the world's going to end in 2021. Now, I've got that all chronicled. I've got all the entire exchange copied and pasted, and I told her, I said, when the date comes and goes, I'm going to approach you. I'm going to come after you, because she got really nasty. I said, I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to expose you. And she disappeared for a little while, but she's popped up again lately. But look, folks, again, all of this kind of paranoia, all of this kind of eschatological excitement, you know, when America killed the Khamenei, the Iranian terrorist general, a couple of weeks ago, all of a sudden on YouTube, all these videos started being produced. Well, this is it. I had a guy on YouTube and on Facebook confront me. He said, Don Preston, you've got to know, without any doubt whatsoever, this is the proof that Gog and Magog is upon us. Well, I responded in saying, and I asked him, I said, how could Gog and Magog be here if Gog and Magog doesn't come until at the end of the millennium? I said, you don't even believe the millennium has begun yet. How could you be saying that the battle of Gog and Magog is imminent? I said, that doesn't even make any sense. So, of course, that ended that conversation pretty quickly. So, but every single time something horrible and horrific happens, pops up on the news, the prophecy pundits, as you commented a couple of weeks, William, weeks ago, when you were commenting on that situation with the Iranian general, that you were just confident that the prophecy pundits would be out in full force. Well, I have to say, I was a little surprised that we didn't see more, but we did see some. But listen to me, folks. Here on Two Guys in the Bible, here on Fulfilled Radio, William and I work really, really, really hard to earn your trust with solid, sane, biblical exegesis, sound logic, sound hermeneutic. Now, if you're looking for us to jump up and start making a bunch of wild predictions about what's going to happen, then, yeah, you've tuned in to the wrong program. Because we believe in taking the Lord at His word that the end of the age was to be in His generation before all that generation died. We believe in taking the word of the apostles when they said the end of all things had drawn near 2,000 years ago. Now, we understand very well, believe you me, we understand very, very well that's not the most popular view in all the world. It's not as, quote, exciting as these other teachers, you know, and we're not going to jump up and tell you, look, the end could come within the next month or so. Send us your money now. and so you won't hear that from us. But what you will hear, hopefully, and we try really, really hard to do this, is to share with you what the Bible actually says and teaches. And I can tell you, because William and I and others like us who are out there teaching the same thing, we hear from people virtually every single day whose lives are being transformed from fear to confidence, from fear to joy, from paranoia and fearful anticipation to confident assurance of the future. Now, look, we're not teaching some kind of Pollyannish, everything's good no matter what happens in the world. No, the world faces some very serious problems. But I want to tell you what, folks, an awful lot of the really bad problems that the world is facing right now, we saw it with the rise of ISIS. I hope everyone understands that the chief motivating, driving force behind ISIS was their eschatological paradigm that said the end of the world is near, and that all they had to do was conquer certain areas, certain regions, certain cities, because those cities were to be the capital of the eschatological climax. If you did not know that, you need to know that. You need to understand that bad eschatology was the driving force and remains the driving force of ISIS, even though they, were pretty soundly defeated to this point. And you need to understand that so much of the world's strife, conflict, and warfare and bloodshed has been caused by bad eschatological doctrine held by world political leaders, chief among them American political leaders, who have told us over and over and over again, Israel remains God's chosen people. We must support them unconditionally, no matter what. And as a result of that, America has supported some of the most horrendous human rights and violations that could possibly be imagined. Because, after all, in the words of Jerry Falwell, who was asked on one occasion, hey, how do you as a Christian leader justify supporting Israel when Israel is confiscating the homes, the land, the properties of the Palestinian there in Israel? And Jerry Falwell said, this is not a precise word-for-word quote, but Jerry Falwell said something to the extent, well, it's unfortunate, but they're not, because that's not really their land. The land belongs to Israel. Israel has a right to kick them out of that land if they want to. Now, there's some humanitarian attitude for you. I mean, so calloused. And yet, that's the attitude of many of the Zionist preachers. It's the attitude that has permeated American foreign policy and continues to influence American foreign policy. And so what we try to do on this program is to bring some sanity and the truth to the study of eschatology. And the very fact that we are hearing from more countries than we ever have, we are hearing from more preachers than we ever have, we are hearing from more, quote, laymen than we ever have. William's ministry and my ministry has grown exponentially over the last few years as more and more people are waking up to the truth of God's faithfulness in keeping His word. Well, I kind of got on a soapbox a little bit there, William, so why don't you offer us a few comments?
Well, Don, I think that you are doing a very good job in presenting the information regarding the temple. I was doing some reflecting thoughts on the rapture doctrine, particularly from the perspective of Matthew chapter 13 and the order of events. As you kind of touched on that very early in the lesson tonight. But, you find in that text where we're talking about the parable of the tares and the wheat when the good seed was sown in the field or in the world, as the text says, and then the bad seed was sown as well along with it. And then one of the questions that the disciples asked was, do you want us to go and gather out the tares, to prevent them from, destroying the wheat? And he says, no, let them both grow together until the time of the harvest. So all of the things that you were explaining from the, top of the lesson tonight, in terms of the order of events, when was the temple going to be built? When was
William,
when was the millennium going to occur? Is it still breaking up? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know
Yeah,
what
every
is
once in a while
causing the breakup. Is that any better?
in and out's what it's doing.
It's still going in and out?
Well, it sounds good.
Okay. All right.
Not
well,
right now.
Okay. All right. Well, at any rate, what you were talking about, I don't know how much of that they got before it started breaking up, but I was looking at the foundation. So it's still dropping out.
Yeah.
Is that okay. All right. Well, let me, I don't know what's going to stop it from doing that, because I'm just, sitting here talking directly into the mic, and, I hope that they can get what I was saying. But the point being is all of the prerequisites that they're making for the return of Christ and the time of that coming and this so-called future building of the temple that they're still waiting on, as you have, so eloquently stated earlier, just really, really runs into a brick wall when you're dealing with a parable as simple as the parable of the tares and wheat. One, because the Lord told them to let both grow together until the harvest, so there's nothing coming out prior to, from the perspective of that judgment. There was no weeding out that was going to take place prior to the return of Christ, and certainly it was not going to be a rapture of the good seed, because the point that he made was first gather the tares, bind them, and put them in bundles, and then and burn them, and then afterwards gather the wheat into my barn. So they get the order incorrect, where they're saying that people are going to be left behind. When I think about that today, with all of these robotic cars and everything that they're making, they used to say, well, you're going to be driving down the street and there's going to be a car or a bus or something, and the driver's going to be going, well, look, you can't say that anymore because we already have the automobile. We already have the automobiles, the cars, the planes that can fly themselves. We got drones going everywhere. And so they don't need pilots anymore to fly planes. They don't need truck drivers. They're already talking about the impact that's going to have on people's economic welfare when they get all these robots going. I was in Walmart the other day. And look, I was in Walmart about to get some oatmeal, and then down the aisle comes this cleaning machine running by itself. I mean, it was cleaning the floor all by itself. So I guess the guy who was running that had been raptured. But at any rate, the point being is the Bible says, let them both grow together till the harvest. There is no intervening event between them separating the ongoing the good seed and the tares until the time of the harvest. And that's also Acts 3:19, where the Bible says that the heavens would receive Christ until the times of restoration of all things spoken by the mouth of all its holy prophets since the age began. So we don't have an interim program of taking part out, leaving the rest behind, and that just makes, the work that, Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins did, and even this work between Thomas Ice and Randall Price, it just makes it all a farce. And as you were saying, it's not the integrity that we strive for right here on Two Guys in the Bible, a voice you can trust.
Well, that's absolutely right. I've used that passage of Matthew chapter 13 any number of times with people in talking about the rapture, even some who want to talk about AD 70 rapture. The fact that Jesus said, gather up the tares first. And I had one individual contact me and ask me what I thought about the rapture doctrine. And I said, well, I don't think it's accurate. I just don't think it's biblical. And they said, well, what are some of your reasons? I said, well, among many, many, many reasons, I gave Matthew chapter 13. I said, according to Jesus, the tares are gathered first. Now, if the rapture is the literal physical removal of people off of the earth, then since the wicked are gathered first, then that means that in 70 A.D., the wicked had to be removed from the earth. Well, then who were all those folks that died, killed by the Romans in 70 A.D.? They most assuredly were not raptured. I mean, when you read the account, and not just in Jerusalem, but when you think about all of the hundreds of thousands of people killed throughout the land of Israel, during the invasion by Vespasian initially, from Joppa all the way down through the land. He was fighting all those wicked people. They weren't raptured. And this individual said to me, well, that appears to me like a pretty slam dunk argument. He said, do you mind if I share that with Ed Stevens, who is the chief proponent of the literal rapture in AD 70? I said, of course I don't mind. They got back with me and said they threw it by Ed, and Ed said, well, I believe the wicked were raptured. No, he doesn't. I'm sorry. No, he doesn't. He knows very good and well the wicked were not removed from the earth. And it won't do to say, oh, well, they were gathered in this city or they were gathered in that city. Well, being gathered into those physical, geographical locations was not being removed from the earth. Certainly not in the same sense that he believes that the rapture removed the living saints off of the earth. And so that passage and Jesus' own explanation of it, number one, it doesn't leave us in the dark about the meaning of it. I mean, when Jesus himself tells us what it means, that ought to lock it down for us. We don't have to worry about it. Don't have to wonder about it. Don't have to speculate about it. And we really shouldn't go about making up any kind of theology, any kind of doctrinal position that violates what Jesus said. But that's exactly, number one, it's exactly what the rapture doctrine does, whether that rapture doctrine is the AD 70 rapture doctrine or whether it's the dispensational rapture doctrine. Both of them have the righteous raptured first, and then the wicked are left behind. That's not what the parable teaches. And so that's a little bit off subject, mind you, but it's all within the confines, all within the parameters of the doctrine of the last days of when the millennial temple is supposed to be constructed. You see, here in Isaiah 65, the Lord condemns Israel for forgetting his holy mountain. You are those which forget my holy mountain, the Lord said. That's why he would bring this destruction, which raises a really interesting question, does it not, William? If this destruction, and if the new temple was going to come because of Israel's violation of the law and abuse of the holy mountain, would that not demand that there would have to be a temple for Israel to abuse? Israel to violate? Okay, then that means there would have to be a temple in existence before the rapture, okay, before the man of sin, because pretty clearly Isaiah 65 is not talking about the rapture. It's talking about Israel abusing the temple, and as a result of the abuse of the temple, Israel being judged. Well, would God judge Israel and destroy Israel for abusing the man of sin temple? Violating that temple? I mean, wouldn't it be pretty cool on the part of Israel if they would not honor the man of sin's temple? I mean, everywhere you turn, the dispensational paradigm runs into extremely severe problems. So, again, Isaiah 65, Israel's abuse of the temple would lead to the destruction of Israel, which would bring in the new heaven and new earth, the new Jerusalem, and the Messianic temple. That's the chronological narrative and timeline of Isaiah 65. There is absolutely nothing in the dispensational narrative that agrees with that, and there's nothing, by the way, in the modern rapture doctrine that agrees with that either. Okay. Well, it looks to me like we're right on the verge of being out of time. We are out of time. Want to thank you for joining us this evening on Two Guys in the Bible here on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. William, as always, great to be with you. With that, I'll say good night. God bless.
Same here, Don.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Don Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.